What on earth is going on? Arsenal looking to make an eighth summer signing. Wow. Wow. What a window this is turning out to be. You're listening to a bonus episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. We were live recording the main pod when David Ornstein dropped this bomber. But we were in the process of wrapping up the show, and I wanted to go away and have a read of the story and understand a little bit more about a potential deal for Piero Hincapie so that I could bring you guys up to speed with exactly what the latest is. Piero Hincapie of Bayer Leverkusen, one of the highly rated central defenders out on the continent, a player who's 23 years old, a player who's got lots and lots of potential, who I've seen play on a number of occasions, who was a part of Xabi Alonso's brilliant Bayer Leverkusen side. Arsenal are interested. Arsenal are hoping to make something happen, but it is dependent, according to David Ornstein, on whether or not they manage to move players out before the summer transfer window shuts. Now, we heard this about Ebere Eze, and I think given the situation with Tottenham and their interest and all the rest of it, Arsenal probably felt like they had to act quickly and get the deal done. Add to the equation the Kai Havertz injury. Mikel Arteta told me at the weekend that that was one of the factors with regards to the kind of timing and the way that Arsenal pushed through the deal for Eberechi Eze when they did. We talked on the main pod earlier today about the potential exit for Jakub Kiwior, who's very similar to Hincapie in that he's a left-sided player. Centre-back can tuck in at full-back if you really want him to as well. So he feels like a like-for-like replacement for Jakub Kiwior. But also, it kind of gives us an indication, I think, that the Kiwior to Porto thing is probably going to happen. You know, we've talked a lot in recent podcasts about why I would prefer for Arsenal to keep Jakub Kiwior. But that was because I didn't think we'd go out and bring in anybody of note to replace him. If you are going to go and bring Piero Hincapie in, then I'm absolutely fine with Arsenal moving Kiwior on, even if it is under those terms that are being discussed, an initial loan with the obligation for FC Porto to buy him down the line, because an obligation means you're going to get your money. An obligation means you don't have to worry about that money. It just means that that money is going to come in a little bit later down the line. And as I've said, if you're a serious football club, if you're a club as big, as powerful, and as wealthy as ours, you should be able to just adjust things, and you should be able to make tweaks and changes and be creative with your accounting in order to make that money available now, even before it's come in. So David Ornstein dropped this at 10:30 on Sunday morning, and he says Arsenal working on a deal to sign Piero Hincapie from Bayer Leverkusen if they manage to move players out before the summer transfer window shuts. Hincapie is under contract at Leverkusen until 2029, but wants to leave and has informed the Bundesliga club of his wish. They would prefer, of course, to keep the 23-year-old unless a 60 million euro release clause is activated, although efforts are being made by Arsenal to lower that fee to a more realistic market value. Eric Ten Hag's gone in there and nobody wants to be there anymore. His preference, according to David Ornstein, is to join Arsenal, and the Premier League side are ready to push for him should departures materialize. The defender appeared tearful on the pitch after his side's 2-1 defeat to Hoffenheim on Saturday, which suggests that he knows and knew that something was in the pipeline. Kiwior, who I've mentioned, has been mentioned in David Ornstein's piece as well. He says he's being pursued by Porto. Zinchenko, Vieira, and Reiss Nelson are among the other squad members who could go too. Hincapie, who normally operates as a left centre-back, but can also be deployed at left-back, and the Ecuador defender has featured prominently on Arsenal's recruitment list for quite some time. He joined Leverkusen from Argentinian side CA Talleres in the summer of 2021 and has established himself as one of Europe's most promising defenders. During his 4 seasons in Germany, he's made 166 appearances for Leverkusen in addition to making 46 appearances for the Ecuador national team. To have 46 international caps at 23 is pretty special. The defender has appeared in Leverkusen's first 2 games of the season, but they've already seen several members of their side that have brought them their recent success depart this summer. Florian Wirtz, Frimpong, Adli, Xhaka, and Jonathan Tah have all left the club, as has head coach Xabi Alonso. Now, we touched on Hincapie. We mentioned his name in the pod that we did earlier today, the main pod, because there was a lot of talk about this. There was a lot of discussion around Hincapie online. It was a story that had seemingly, sort of gathered a little bit of pace online. But obviously, when it comes from David Ornstein, all of a sudden, it's taken with a lot more seriousness, and people are much, much more inclined to kind of believe it. So here we are now talking about it just 15 minutes after the news broke. And I have to say, like, we can talk all we want about, where Arsenal fell short over the last couple of years. And I think last year, squad depth was a problem, but also we did have an unprecedented amount of injuries. So the question was for me going into this summer, how do you address that issue of a lack of depth without going over the top? Because too much change can be a problem. I really do believe that. I'm not saying that I don't want us to sign players that are going to improve us. I'm not saying that. But when you make loads of changes, there is going to be a period where you're trying to build new relationships and you're trying to bed everybody in. And I'd argue that having changed some of the key pieces in our team, that's probably why our performances at the beginning of the season have been a little bit up and down. So we weren't very good at Manchester United, but we found a way to win because we've got a strong core that pre-existed. We played Leeds, and for the first half an hour, again, we looked like we lacked cohesion. We looked like the relationships were not quite there. The tempo, the rhythm wasn't quite there. But in time, we kind of grew into the game. And once we got the breakthrough, it was pretty much one-way traffic. Hincapie coming in would be another new piece that we need to fit into the puzzle. But, I mean, there are many games, particularly in the cup competitions, right, where I would be more than happy to go into them with a centre-back partnership of Mosquera and Hincapie. Do you see what I mean? That's the level of depth that we'd be adding here. That's the level of quality that we'd be bringing in. Someone who's just won the Bundesliga unbeaten will be coming in to be a backup centre-half at Arsenal, which just shows you how high they are raising the bar right now. Now, yes, this is dependent on departures, but right now, as we speak, on the 25th of August, I'm very, very, very confident that Arsenal will move these players on. They will move Kivior on, I think. Porto expected to come back in for Jakub Kivior this week. That's according to Fabrizio Romano. I think a deal will be done there. I think Zinchenko probably does go. I'm certain that Reece Nelson ends up leaving the club in some capacity. It might be a loan. It might be a permanent transfer. We're not sure yet. And I think Fabio Vieira will go as well. I think eventually Arsenal will just lower their demands a little bit. And we know that, of course, there is interest from Germany in him. So I think these departures that David Ornstein says obviously play a major part in whether or not we push for Hincapie. I think they're going to be done. And so I'm not worried about that element of it per se. Arsenal will try and negotiate the fee down because they've done what they've been doing all summer, which is going out there and convincing people that Arsenal's the place to be, convincing people that this is the right club for them and that this is a project that they should want to be a part of. And when you've convinced the player, my God, does it improve your negotiating position? Yes, Bayer Leverkusen have a release clause in there, but if Hincapie has gone in and told them, I want to leave, my preference is Arsenal, and he's saying emotional goodbyes to the players, then if you're Bayer Leverkusen and you're getting towards the back end of the window, you're going, yeah, like we'd kind of ideally like to get that 60 million euros in, but we might have to accept slightly less than that. And if you can make a saving of even 5, 7, 8 million pounds, that is massive. That's a lot of money, and that can pay two big salaries of two important players in your squad. So it's really, really important that Arsenal put themselves in this position where they're negotiating from a position of strength. And we're seeing that over and over and over again this summer. The way we are operating in the window is completely different to the way that we operated previously. We've got an experienced operator in there in Andrea Berta. They've gone out, they've had conversations, they've convinced people, they've turned people's heads already, and they've put themselves in a position where when things align, they are ready to pull the trigger. They are ready to make things happen just like that. And that is the difference between Arsenal of the past and Arsenal of now. Now, that doesn't mean that because we're doing all this business that on paper looks fantastic, that we're guaranteed success. There are other things that need to be done right, that need to be done well. The onus is on the players and the onus is on the manager. But if Arsenal go and get in Hincapie and make him our 8th signing, on top of the signings of Kepa, Mosquera, Zubimendi, Norgard, Madueke, Gyökeres, and more recently, Ebere Eze, then you can't question the club's ambition. You can't question the people upstairs. They'd have done their job, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of assembling a squad that Mikel Arteta can go and win the biggest trophies with. And if we don't win the biggest trophies, having done all of that business and having done basically everything we can, then we can have a conversation about the other elements. Are certain players good enough? Are they as good as we thought? Is the manager good enough? I'm happy to entertain those conversations at that point, because I cannot sit here and fault Arsenal for the window. You know, prior to the Eze signing, I would have said, not really sure. Have we left ourselves one short? And I thought we'd lose Kivior, and I thought we'd probably lose Zinchenko. But if you go and bring in Hincapie as well, then that's a remarkable window from the Gunners. It really, really is. And it would just show that at least upstairs, there is a real ambition to succeed and to win things. And I think it would put people like me back in my box to a degree, where at times over the last few years, I've looked and I've gone, do you really want this? Like, do you really want it as much as other ownerships? Do you really want it as much as the other big, big clubs in the game? I think this tells us that they want it. Whether they're going to be able to get it and get over the line is another story, but they definitely want it, because this would be another major signing for Arsenal. Piero Hincapie is a player that Arsenal are working on the signing of, according to David Ornstein. Yes, they need to get some players out the door, but I'm confident they'll do that in the last week or so of the window. It is all happening at Arsenal, and we'll talk about it, I'm sure, in much more detail and at greater length on the next episode. Go back and check the main pod, which we did earlier today, where we talked about the Ian Wright Eze interview, which was fantastic. We talked about Saka and Odegaard, the latest on their injuries, and we did discuss Jakub Kivior and his potential move to Porto in a lot more detail. Go check it out. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Thank you so much for being with me on another bonus pod. Until the next one, take care. Goodbye.